on the road here. It's a 2000.
Saying it's at 5 o'clock.
He wants 49,500 for it.
Guys.
And it's got 30,000 miles.
Saying it's 5 o'clock. We'd call the planning commission meeting to order. Look for us adopted agenda.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Motion's made and second to adopt the agenda. Couple of changes to the agenda.
Yes. What we're gonna do, we're gonna remove number 6, preliminary review rezoning Partridge Drive. That individual changed his mind. Let me know that today, so we're gonna remove number 6. We're also gonna move number 4, discussion on updating the comprehensive plan. That's gonna be the bulk of our meeting tonight, and we're gonna move that to after number 8 to allow Randy Randy doesn't need to sit here for 45 minutes and listen to comp plan, so we'll let you get in and get out. So we're gonna move number 4 to after number 8, those 2 changes.
I'd look for approval of the February 25th meeting minutes.
I have a question on that. I abstained on that one thing, and
Okay.
that it's on here. It says that motion carried by all. Does that need to say that I abstained?
Okay, I will make that change. So which one was that? Item
312 Elm Street,
312. Elm
second
Street.
page.
So change. Thank you. I'll make that change.
Okay, so I'd look for approval of the February 25th meeting minutes.
With that change, I would make.
With that change.
That change made, yeah.
I'll second it.
Motion been made and seconded.
Who motion? Gave me the motion, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved? Motion's carried. Hey, we guess we're going to be heading to the preliminary review for rezoning request on Becker Road for Randy Retzloff.
Yep, Randy, if you want to come up, if we got any questions, you can come on down. Randy is looking at purchasing, or maybe has purchased the property already, over at Beckert and Oshkosh. And I'll bring up our city map here so you guys can see what it looks like from the aerials. But does everybody know where the parcel is that we're talking about? So Beckert and Oshkosh, there's a large parcel here. Randy, is it what, 16 acres or?
16, low over.
A little over 16 acres. So Randy's interested in creating a development there, which is really, really cool. Preliminary thoughts are to extend Southland to actually hook up with Oshkosh. And I'll bring up the main map again. You can see Southland here, and then it would wrap through on Oshkosh. And then let me get back to the map here. So it would be to do a multifamily on the southern end, and then on the road, single family and or duplexes maybe, or is it just all single family you're thinking?
Well, initially the 5 8-unit buildings there on the south side,
Mhm.
that would be all private drive. There would be no city road going in there.
Yep.
And then the others, well, that's open. We'll get this series done, and then we'll take a look at it when we're done with this part.
So right
Or a
now,
little bit before, you know.
so right now the thought process is, is the planning commission, just as a preliminary thought, do you guys have any concerns with that development? And then also zoning wise to, adjust the zoning on that bottom acre or that bottom part of that parcel for the multifamily. You can see we've got our 4 multifamilies that are over there already. And this would just be extending that next to it. And then the existing, single families would be, this is still R1 through here right now. So as Randy's doing his planning, he just wanted to know what you guys are thoughts about that concept, and then making that bottom part of it mimic the R4 that's currently there on that one side.
Where's Trinity Church in there? Right there?
That would be right there.
Right there. Okay.
Yep.
Those other apartments are just to the
Right.
west of where you're
It'd be
talking
to
about.
the straight west.
Yeah.
And I can turn off the zone again and
And there's a lot between the other apartments there and the parcel that I'm purchasing, and that's already zoned R4.
Okay,
It's just a sliver of land. It's not a lot, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
probably, I think it's less than a half an acre.
these 3 lots right here.
Yes, yeah. And at this time, I would not need to acquire them. As we get a little bit further in, then possibly,
anybody have any questions?
And it's not really on for a voting tonight. It's just a matter of giving feedback to Randy as he's moving forward to say, if you guys,
I think it sounds
Nodding
like a
head.
great
Yeah.
concept, great use of property out there.
Right.
that land's been sitting there for,
Long time.
since I was a kid,
Yeah.
and I checked into purchasing it probably 25 years ago, and he wouldn't have nothing to do with it. And he's 95 now, he's willing to sell. So,
and then Jay, I don't know if you want to touch base. You've got, utility lines that run through here.
I already had a little bit of a discussion with Randy. That won't be a problem to engineer that to underground. We have an underground cabinet that feeds the church currently from that overhead. So we would put underground from Beckert Road, or we could feed it from Pershing. So it'll contact Forrester and they'll give us a drawing and we can go from there. I just needed your preliminary drawing here and we can move forward on that.
that's something we would definitely want, would be
Yeah.
the underground.
That was Gene Laughlin's?
What's that?
That was Gene Laughlin's?
Yes,
property?
Eugene.
Yeah.
And eventually, I'm assuming your concept would be that this would become a public roadway.
If we did single family, yes.
So what do we need? We don't need anything out of it, just that we're,
Randy was just bringing the thought process to see
Okay.
if you guys were, nodding your head to that conceptual design, and not that he got too far with things.
Yeah.
And
you don't have any problem with the, you with it?
Well, we'd have to change the zoning,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
And I might suggest even those 3 parcels there, if we're going to do that, maybe change the zoning on those as well. Because they could still put single family even though it's changed to an R4.
Sure.
So they would still have that option if they wanted to.
Right.
But from a zoning standpoint, normally you don't do spot zoning. But since there's adjacent property with the same zoning, I think it would work well with our plan.
Mhm.
You got any other questions, Randy?
No,
It looks
yeah,
like,
the sooner I could get a approval on it at some point here, the sooner we can move on it, so.
we'll have to go through that process for
Yeah.
the rezoning, which is a process. But yeah,
you're probably looking at putting that on the agenda for next month then, huh?
we have to get ordinance, and
Yeah,
we have to
yeah.
go through that whole thing.
all right.
Randy, is there anything else you need from us at
No.
this point?
No.
The plan?
Good to go?
Okay, thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It looks like we're going to be going to 7 then. Consider the CSM request 520 Spur Road, Dorothy Petit.
Yep. So there is let's see here. In your packet, there was a CSM. It sounds like that, and Dave, were you working on this one, or was Randy working on this one?
It must have been Randy.
Okay.
I've looked at it, but I haven't done any of the legwork on it.
Yep. So currently, the parcel includes both this lot, proposed lot, and this proposed lot. And from what I'm gathering, the owner Petit is looking at separating those off and then selling this lot that they're breaking off to the owners of currently lot 3. So it looks like it's breaking it off to sell the lot over there. I can bring up the aerial of that one as well to give you a better visual.
That's just east of 45.
Yes. There's the industrial park up here. So here's Spur Road and 45, that intersection. And this is the current lot right here as it sits. So looks like they're going to be breaking off the homestead right now from this to be able to sell it to the adjacent property owner right here. Missy's looked at the CSM. CSM looks like everything lines up with our mapping, so everything looks good on our end, so we're looking for an approval to bless that CSM.
Also move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded that we consider or grant the CSM request for 520 Spur Road for Dorothy Petit. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, review the CSM for the city for the road right-of-way and the Trident Finance.
Yep. So we've been talking about this one for a couple months, adjusting the road right away here for Thrivent for that sign request. Missy's looked at this one as well. You guys, we've talked about this one in the past. You guys kind of know the story where this is coming from. So it'd be a matter of adjusting the road right away here for that. There are some utilities in there that will make sure that we have easement in this parcel because I believe there's water in that corner right now. So we want to make sure the utility easement is set from there, but we still have a minimum of 60 foot right away with everything in there. So it'll be a matter of you guys to bless that CSM so we can go ahead and, change that so they can put up their sign.
You didn't have any problems with that then, huh?
No.
Okay. I look for a motion to grant the CSM for Trident.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Motion's made and second to grant the CSM to Trident for their sign. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Oh, do we want to go back to number 4 then?
Yep. So the bulk of our conversation tonight. Tonight we have Ken Drajowski and Eric Fowle from Cedar Corp. We've hired Cedar Corp to help us with updating our comprehensive plan for the city. This is primarily talking about updating the zoning, which is cool that we've been talking about this tonight. So I'm just gonna let these guys run with it and let them go.
Okay, well, we'll give you a little background. I'm Ken, that's Eric, okay, and I'm Howard here. As Chad mentioned, Cedar Corporation's been hired to begin the comprehensive plan update process, and when we talked about it originally, we thought it probably would be best to just amend the land use element of the comprehensive plan. I don't know how familiar you are with your planning document. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. But basically, your comprehensive plan has 9 required elements. That's what the statute has. Issues and opportunities, housing, transportation, utilities, community facilities, ag, natural, and cultural resources, economic development, intergovernmental cooperation, land use, and implementation. Those are the 9 elements, okay? And basically, the state law says that before you make any land use decisions, that's typically noted as zonings, official mapping, or any land divisions, your actions need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's how that ties together. Originally, when we talked about updating the plan, it seemed the biggest need here is whether or not your preferred land use map, which you have in your document right now, also called future land use map, is guiding some of your development that you're seeing proposed. So let's just use the example of the rezoning that you had here moments ago. Okay, there's a multifamily that's being proposed there. As part of that zoning review, you would look to your future land use map and see, has that been identified as a multifamily area? Well, our quick review showed that it was. Okay, so the plan is directing the rezoning in that case so that it would be consistent and you could formulate the rezoning. Now, had that not been the case, the proper procedure then would have been to amend for the city to amend the comprehensive plan to show that area as multifamily. Now that process would go first. You would need to make that amendment before you do the rezoning. Okay. So when we talked about updating your plan, instead of going after the whole thing, and one of the reasons was, we just got done with the census, and a lot of this demographic information that we use in comprehensive planning is tied up into that data, and that won't be released till 2022. So the thought is to get you folks so that your future land use plan is helping you as much as possible. Let's amend just that component first this year, okay? And then when the census information comes in next year, you would amend the rest of the plan, okay? And we might have to go back to the land use element and tweak it a little bit on the projections, but it seems like your biggest need is to make sure that your future land use map is directing your land use decisions properly, okay? So that's what we're going to be focusing on, all right? Now, there's a lot of different elements to just the land use section itself. And one of them is just making sure that your existing land use information is accurate. So, you know, we've already developed an existing land use map, which comes from data from the county as well as Wapaka County and East Central Regional Planning Commission. But this information goes back to 2015, so it has not been updated since that time. So we want to make sure, and we're going to be working with Chad and his staff, and we've got some blow-up maps behind this that you don't have to see, but they'll be able to go and just make sure that our existing land use map is that the uses that are there are still there. And if there's been any changes, they're going to note them. We're going to take those back and we're going to change them. Okay. And then, the other sections of the land use plan will include like the projections themselves, like how many acres should you have planned for residential development? How many acres for commercial and industrial? And there should be tied to some projections of some sort. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But Eric has passed out a packet to you. So what we want to do is just kind of hit on the sections that kind of show up already in this element in your plan and just do a little cleansing or some discussion on some of these points.
You don't have the whole packet, I just doing one at a time.
Okay,
So-
okay. So the first one you should have there is section H4, preferred land use. It talks about what a land use plan is. It's a vision for the future. It is not the same as zoning, but I think you folks have been through this long enough, you know that. There's some communities I work with that still get that confused. But you folks, I can just know how a plan works with zoning. But it doesn't have to be implemented exclusively with zoning. It's long range, so we're going to, when we go through this process, the map that we develop should have at least a planning horizon of 20 years. Okay, we should be looking at least that far down the road to see what those future land uses would be. And it is neither a prediction or a guarantee. So, I mean, as I said, if things change, we can amend it. But again, once it gets amended, it should drive your rezoning. So our first question to you here tonight is to tell us, I mean, what has been your history with using your comprehensive plan, specifically that future land use map? Have you used it? Do you use it like a Bible, or is it just kind of a rough guide? What has been your history with using your comprehensive plan, specifically a future land use map, to guide your decisions? Anyone?
I think it's been more of a reference for us,
Or a reference?
so much a guide, because every instance is looked at individually. So, just because we have the plan doesn't mean we have to stick to it. We obviously make decisions to change zoning. So we do refer to the plan first,
You do.
but it's not the main driver behind the decision that at least that's my determination that I feel.
Okay. And would I be accurate in saying that because of that, you envision your future land use map is you'd prefer to have more flexibility within it, or would you?
I think we're going to have flexibility. I mean, you're more familiar with the map. Do you see any discrepancies with what we've done in the past?
Well, that's just it. I don't know that. Our gauge right now is just to find out how specifically you use it.
Have you been, put it this way, I mean, the rezoning that was put forth here today, or potential, was
Mhm.
pretty cut and dry, it looks
Right.
like, in terms of consistency.
Yep.
Have you been put in a corner, so to speak,
We
recently?
do
about-
have one in the past that we've looked at that we
Yeah.
feel that she wants it to be a different zoning than we're going to be required to give her.
Okay,
So that is something on the horizon that I've seen that doesn't meet our comprehensive plan. And then
Is
that
that-
would be considered spot zoning, and that's something that we don't want to do.
No, and that's good, and that's certainly the proper response. You'd need to go back to the plan, revisit it, and go through that process to make that first consideration, if you will. Are you running into those kind of situations more frequently, would you say? Been any pattern to
No.
that, or pretty isolated?
I don't think so.
I think it's more
Would
isolated.
you prefer that we use your plan or do it like we've been doing it?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I will tell you this, with how statutorily it's set up, okay? If you make a rezoning decision, okay, and let's just say the plan didn't support it, okay? Technically that opens you up for a little liability if some neighbor was not in support of this rezoning because they feel maybe it devalued their property, that could be an avenue into the process. So you folks didn't follow the statutes, you did it wrong. Okay, for this rezoning to have occurred, you should have amended the plan, which meant you needed to do this public input process, so we all could have came and talked about it, whether or not it was in the city's best interest. Okay, and if it did pass, then your rezoning would be supported by it. So now, has there been a lot of cases where comp plans have been challenged by poor rezoning decisions? No. So I'm not trying to scare you. But all I can tell you is that that's how the statute's set up with the form. Okay, it hasn't been challenged much at all because probably some factors come into play. So that's why when I have this discussions with communities, I ask them this question. Do you prefer your plan to be more generalized so it gives you some flexibility on rezoning? Okay, I'll give you an example. Instead of having an area specifically on your future land use map designated for multifamily, you would just call everything as a residential property, regardless multifamily, two-family, or single-family, residential. Okay, and then your plan would say that within the residential category, we could have single-family, two-family, this density, multifamily, fourplexes, and you would evaluate. Okay, in that scenario, your rezoning to a multifamily district would be consistent with the plan because your plan was very general in directing residential. Okay, however, some people think that might be a little dangerous if you've got property in single family and somebody could develop next to them. They may be thinking residential single family, and all of a sudden the fourplexes show up, and so that's why this discussion becomes important, because it may make your job easier if it's flexible, but it may not be giving the transparency that the public would like to see. Maybe they want to know where resident or multifamily is going, where highway commercial is going that could generate large traffic, where industrial is going, and so forth. So you get my point.
Well, and when we developed the plan originally, that was the concept that most people supported, was to have control, not just let it go until it happened and then try to work it out. It saved a lot of problems.
Right, and Eric hasn't handed it out yet, but if you want to go to 8.5, that's a pretty good lead into that. I think they've told us pretty much where we want to go.
So, kind of sitting on the shelf gathering dust, it sounds like.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like you would prefer, being a little bit more clear on the types of uses you want. And that's how your plan was set up originally. Now, Eric just passed out these classifications. This is what your current land use plan has for categories. Okay, again, these don't, it's got 10 of them, all right, and they're coded. And they apparently, at the time that you developed the plan, Planning Commission felt they were representative of the detail you needed to direct development. So that's why in red, our first discussion point is looking at these categories that are there, these 10. Do you feel that these are still representative of the direction you want to go with your mapping? Is that enough detail?
think a little bit about some of the trends that are happening, and obviously part of planning is trying to predict the future. It's almost impossible, but we're seeing a lot of changes in communities all throughout the state, particularly northeastern Wisconsin, with respect to affordable housing, workforce housing, sometimes as it's called, different types of housing, whether it's tiny houses or something called accessory dwelling units, putting an apartment above the garage in the back, small mother-in-law apartment, those kinds of things. Think about the impacts of Highway 15 expansion. What's that going to do for business industry opportunities or more growth? What are you foreseeing that may not be captured in some of these districts?
What is that number 9, public institutional?
Well, it's this building right here,
Oh,
schools,
okay.
those types of things.
Okay.
We've already,
Generally used by the public.
we've already had conversations with tiny homes people.
Yeah.
So that's an area that we wanted to act instead of having to react.
Mhm.
And that's kind of fallen by the wayside over last year,
Mhm.
as everything has.
That doesn't mean it's
But,
not going to come back, though, and from what we're seeing in a
Yeah.
lot of communities,
Yeah.
the pressure's really starting to build.
And also, as you said, Eric, the mother-in-law thing, I think we've done a couple of those in the past year and a half or 2 years, where the mother's house burned down and they're moving mom over.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have provisions in your zoning ordinance to allow for those uses, or?
I don't have it memorized off the top of my head. I don't know, Dave, if you came across that either. I'd have to look
I haven't ran across any yet.
No?
I
Okay.
think what we, the one I can think of particularly
Is that one
was
out
out on the House Road.
We just did
and-
that a few months ago.
Yeah.
Well, I
So,
had worked with Paul before on
Yeah.
on the tiny home and gave him some language and stuff like that. And I
Yeah.
don't know how far that went, but that was
Yeah.
certainly at a time, seemed to be something that was being talked about a lot. And that the city felt, given their association with the river as a recreational area, that some people would come here for just a short period of time, maybe the summers, and then leave and so forth. Now, I don't know if that got codified or not, but I did provide them
Yeah.
some interest. But as Eric said, these accessory dwelling units are becoming a big thing. A lot of, the term out there is used, aging in place, where, people want to stay in their home as long as they possibly can before they have to go to assisted living or whatever. And because of the cost, certain family members are willing to step up and take care of their parents on their site, but you still want some separation. Kids don't want to leave the nest maybe as quickly as they have in the past, so sometimes they hang around, but they still want independency and so forth. And, you can go as far as some of these places being rented out for additional income for the family so that they can afford their home, and we all know about, Airbnbs and those types of things. Sometimes that gets a little chattery with residential developments and so forth, but those are some of the trends that we see from the housing side. Now, it may not change our map, but it may change the wording within the categories themselves. So when we look at this, we say single family residential, okay? If we believe that accessory dwelling units are something that could be part of that, then our classification or description under that, this classification needs to say that, so that there's no misunderstanding
right.
about it. And then, of course, the next step is you go to the codes to codify it, to make it happen. But, so these are now, some of the other trends, as Eric was saying, well, we just got through a pandemic, okay, or we haven't got through it yet. But we're seeing some things that are occurring. And what is probably the biggest thing? More people working at home, right? They've been directed to do so. And some people are getting pretty darn comfortable with it, and they think that's a pretty good gig, okay? So you're going to see a little bit, maybe more of that, and you also are probably going to see more home-based business be generated, so we have to talk about some thresholds about that. I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying that, if you think that someone, what are the thresholds to allow business within the home? And there seems to be more entrepreneurial spirit out there to try to develop and incubate some smaller economic opportunities, try to use the home as much as you possibly can. So that might be something that we want to address as well. And we wouldn't have to have a district for it, but, you know, it could go to, as far as actually having an overlay district over certain residential areas that may be more palatable to home-based business as opposed to others. Lot size has a lot to do with that.
We did have that home-based situation, though, it might have been a couple of years ago, where then the ordinance, people were questioning some of the ordinances about parking and using
lighting, hours of
signage and lights and operation,
shipping,
that
receiving.
because it was right in the residential area. And so that might be, you know, we may see more of that with people working from home and setting up their own. So that would be something that we have addressed in the past as far as the ordinances of it.
Another trend that we're seeing a little bit more of, and this would especially relate to more of your downtown areas here, your smaller lot, your more older developed areas, and that is this move to mixed use. Okay, and sometimes you'll have a commercial and maybe apartments on top, or you know, commercial side by next to a small residential property that the person owns or whatever. So you're beginning to see some communities, instead of trying to regulate, okay, we got a little area here for business, then we got a little area here for residential, we got a little, it's trying to kind of classify it as a mixed use region or area and develop codes that speak a little bit, that they're a little bit more on point with smaller side yard setbacks, because a lot of times those lots are really, really tight. You don't have much to work with. They're trying to do something in there, so you might want to create a district that deals with more mixed use and gives more flexibility. You don't want these areas to become so suppressed in what they can be that you end up with blighted situations or poor economic value. Okay, so you just say, all right, within these areas, we're going to have a mix of uses. We're not going to regulate. Not each parcel isn't going to have its own use. It could be a variety of uses. That could be something that interests the city here as a community. And we could look for areas like that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly downtown environments, as you've got noted in your plan, are very appropriate for mixed use. They pretty much have been since they were created. But we're finding more communities not only look at rehabbing their downtowns, but perhaps expanding on them. And I think New London's in a situation where, based on some of the property uses, that could happen. There could be growth adjacent to downtown, but you may not want it just strictly single family or multifamily in the traditional sense, that you want to try and help build that business base and opportunity. So other corridors of older commercial growth, you often see transition over time into mixed use developments and communities that really want to push it, try and change that to make it more pedestrian oriented. So again, building with retail on the first floor, some apartments above is often the case. So, you know, if you feel there's opportunities or desires to move in that direction in certain places, this would be the good time to know that now. And we can start thinking about that in terms of the descriptions, whether mixed use should apply solely to those two districts you have here, maybe broadened a little bit, areas of higher intensity, residential or commercial development, it may be appropriate. And then we can figure out where it gets mapped, if it gets mapped. But, you know, what are you seeing? Do you have those desires to have more of that kind of development?
I think that's a thing of the future that we really should consider it strongly.
So what we can do in that case, Chad, is, you know, when you do your review and we get into these, you know, tighter sections or whatever, you know, we may, and we know what the existing land use is in there, we could start looking at some potential target areas for that to occur. Okay, and then through the public hearing process, we'll determine whether or not people are supportive of that concept. We may have to back off. We may think it's too much of the Wild West, you know, but on the other hand, like you said, it's got some advantages because it's the way of the future. You want to make sure that these parcels are continue to be maintained and active and are receiving investment and so forth. So you want to increase that. So it's a little bit of a balance, but if we can get that information, Eric and I can start looking at some scenarios there.
And if people come in and they have a business plan, they're gung ho to go. They don't want to be told, oh, we're going to have to change this. We're going to have to do this. We're going to, and delay them 6, 8, 12 months. That's not going to get people to be happy about coming to New London. So we need to have everything in a go position all the time.
Good point. Good point.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is there isn't anybody jumping up and saying that these 10 categories are off base. It's just a matter of making sure that we refine their boundaries or their areas. There no one's screaming for a certain classification, maybe other than mixed use that we just talked about, that we would look for something different than these.
And where does currently ag fit in on here? I mean, we've got ag places out there that is owned for agriculture right now. Obviously, it's something that changes because that's some of the first things that are rezoned because as the development goes out.
Well, on this map, which is the existing land use map, you're going to have agriculture.
Yep.
Okay. So, but on your future land use map, which is not here, not up here, typically those areas are designated to some sort of future use. Okay. Now, this may not be, I'm just using this, I don't know the science behind this, but let's just talk about this here a little bit, and just say, okay, well, we're going to make that, I don't know, a commercial area. Okay. Well, then you have to look at, can you get service to it? And how should it be phased? So it's not all that uncommon that you'll see the existing land use map, you go to the future land use map and you see all that agriculture area get colored either residentially, commercial, industrial, but you need to then show a phased approach into those areas based on your utility extensions. Okay, because you don't want to create a situation where somebody wants to leapfrog out there and you got to run it way past undeveloped property just to serve something. So if you notice on your sheet here, 8.5, your past plan made an attempt to do that. Secondary growth, primary growth. Okay, so it showed although those areas were planned for a land use transition, they were either primary, meaning that it's going to go there first, or secondary, it may take a while to get there and the utilities got to come up for it. Now, we can use that same concept. We don't have to call it primary, secondary. We can call it phased approach, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Okay, but what we're going to want to do is work with Chad and his DPW and whoever else to make sure that it's a logical progression of utilities to get to serve these areas so that you as a plan commission have good guidance when you're reviewing proposals as to what the timing of that development is. Sure, Mr. Developer, it's residential, but it's in phase 2 or it's in phase 3. Therefore, unless we get this other development first, you're probably going to be waiting. That kind of phasing approach.
Back to your point too, Chad, agriculture lands, woodlands, other just open spaces under the conservation category in this. It's not really considered conservation from a strong perspective. Resource protection appears to do that. So I would almost say it's a little misleading with that term. Conservation for future growth is really what you mean. So I think, we could play around with that terminology, probably keep the same things in that district, but be a little more forthwith with the public that, someday something's going to come along here. Yes, it's phased, it's long-term, whatever other descriptors we put in. But yeah, at first glance, when I saw the two conservation, yes and no.
That means you don't touch it.
That's a very good point. That's some of the tweaking that needs to be done because that could be a misrepresentation of what you want to do. I mean, I'm assuming, folks, that, any area that's agriculture right now, that's probably not the preferred future use of that area if it's in the city. Would I be accurate in that statement?
Right.
I mean, not that you're anti-agriculture or anything like that, but I mean, if it's coming in the city, it came in the city with kind of the expectation that it's going to transition over time. Somebody had a discussion.
We had
about something.
farms, we had farms pretty close to Highway 45 and
Yeah,
54.
Yeah. But what Eric's saying, that's a good point, Eric, you brought that up. I mean, conservation makes it sound like it's lock and key, but typically conservation is noted for areas that are in floodplain. You don't want development there. It's green space for the community. It's got other values and so forth. But your agriculture area shouldn't be conservation under that classification. They should be designated to a more intense use. And then we do the phasing over it to see how it transitions.
What was the zoning out on that London Acres when we went through that with the town of Mucko? It wasn't really zoned anything, was it? Because it was the town of Muck was.
Right.
It was not zoned in the city because they annexed
They
it.
annexed
Okay.
in at that time.
I'd love to see old preferred use if that was actually designated at that time.
I think some of the conversations lead right into the next part
Yeah,
here.
why don't
and
you grab that one, Eric?
Really just, as you can see, trying to check in on the components of the plan or this chapter here. It's hard to make assumptions, and we don't want to do that. We know the plan was done a number of years ago, times change, conditions change. I'm presuming when you did the last plan, it went fairly well. I'm guessing you didn't have a lot of folks with pitchforks and torches at the
Close.
meetings.
Close.
Okay.
Who here was with the last plan? Who was involved in that? Just you two?
I wasn't.
Probably just me.
Donna.
The institutional knowledge.
Yeah,
You're
there you
good.
go.
Reminder.
Don't say institutional. I'm getting close to that
I didn't
too.
mean it that way. As part of that process of doing a smart growth plan, it's also required you kind of notify and work with your neighbors as well. And I'm guessing that relationship, at least through this process, was amicable. There were no huge issues across the borders. Okay. And, a lot of these potential land use conflicts, talk about things within your control, within the community, or sometimes things a little beyond your control, siting of power transmission lines, telecommunication towers. But we really just wanted to kind of check in, is this listing still pretty current, you feel, of the things you want to accomplish with the plan? Have there been new issues that have arisen that have caused any conflict or consternation within the community? Or even outside that you feel are conflicts that need to be added to this list?
And we're kind of throwing this at you here pretty quick. And my suggestion would be just to kind of take this back with you and give this some thought and make some notes on this and maybe get them back to Chad. Look through this to see if these bullets in your mind still apply. Okay. But there may be some other conflicts that have come up that aren't listed here that we want to add, and note them as well, okay? And for example, we had the discussion about working from home, or home-based businesses, could that be a potential land use conflict? If you think so, we can just note that, So.
Well, I think what Eric talked about before with the Highway 15 expansion, that's gonna hopefully open some doors for things. So I think we as a planning commission need to think about how that's gonna affect the money. I think that's a thought process we gotta focus on as well.
You feel you're going to start seeing increased pressure that direction, that southeast corner of the city?
Let's hope so.
Yeah. What does the town of Hortonia, do they have any kind of communication with us as far as what they're seeing? Because that would be the next community over, as far, or not community, but township. I mean, are they seeing anything so far or not really? It's really still Greenville coming this way, right? I mean, at least what I see.
Yeah, we're not going that way.
Yeah. It seems like it'll come this way, and whether the Highway 15 will increase that or speed it up, I mean, I don't know. I think it's got a ways to come yet, is what I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Most of the pressures are going to be between Greenville and Hortonville, and it's evident even over past years. They've been fighting a little bit over some of the land in between. I think they've got it all resolved now, but they both have big plans to accommodate new commercial development, things appropriate to the highway corridor. There's been, always been residential growth in Greenville. Hortonville's trying to latch onto that a little bit as well. But I mean, with the accessibility of a new highway facility, getting out to London is going to shave some time off, just like it did my drive out here on Highway 10. I keep forgetting, gee, it only takes me 35 minutes to get there. I'm always 10 minutes early, because the old days it was 45 at least. So that's going to open you up probably more to residential development pressures, bedroom community. And I don't mean that disparagingly,
Right.
but what opportunities exist there. And of course, business, industry, commercial, all rely on workforce. They all rely on customers. So the rooftops are going to be needed if you're going to look at continued expansion of the commercial industrial base, certainly. So again, it's long-term. You're not going to see it happen overnight, but I think the community will become more attractive just because one more piece of road gives more accessibility.
So you can look at that conflict list and, like I said, add some things or give this a review and get back to us. This isn't just something that we want to keep tabs on as we develop this chapter. But, I guess as long as we've kind of broken the ice on things, relative to residential, what types of residential development do you think the community needs? What types of residential development do you see more developers or interest in? Let's have a little bit of discussion, because residential is a big land use category, and you are a community that is, your own community. I mean, you're a separate community away from a lot of the valley and so forth. So you have a complete community of all these balances. So when people move to New London, I'm assuming they want to be part of community and they want to anchor here in their residential home and live as a community, an independent community. That said, housing can be all over the board because, you need multifamily housing to maintain a workforce and to accommodate the younger workers who are willing to start out, that don't have the equity yet to buy their own home. So you can't just develop large lot, single family mini castles and expect your community to prosper, because you're really only dealing with one demographic. Okay, so that said, let's just have a brief discussion of what you see out there, what you think the community needs, and
I think we already have an explosion of housing happening. I mean, we haven't done electric services. When I first started working for the utilities, we'd put in 60 residential services in a year, and that went down to 15 to 10. And now I think we're seeing it come back. I mean, we kind of know all the irons we have in the fire here. We have the river development, and then the Swiderski property out by House Road, and then Retzloff, who is just here. So I think we're seeing our boom occur right now.
okay.
I mean, we only have, you can kind of tell by the map, we only have certain areas that can be developed. Everything that we're going to see for future housing is going to have to be annexed into the city. So
you're pretty tight with the available land for housing within
Yes.
your city boundary right
Yep.
now. Okay, well, that's huge to know. Okay.
She hit it right on the head. I mean, we've got developers that are coming and doing both. I mean,
Yeah.
multifamily and single family.
Yep.
SC Swiderski, bigger firm, Stevens Point area, came in and did a study and felt they were going to be successful. So they not only worked with us for our downtown development, because we've got a planned use downtown multifamily housing development going on down there, but they also turned around and bought another parcel in town to continue that, because they felt they're going to be successful that way. Randy Retzloff, the same thing. I mean, he felt multifamily, which he has multifamily already in town.
Mhm.
So he's got his finger on the pulse in town already.
And those apartments out on Partridge filled up fast. That was one of the last developments, as well as the ones by Simmons.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing the realtors say there's not a lot of single-family homes available
Correct.
in town right now.
Join the club.
Yep. So I mean, on that end too, the single-family is obviously the cost of construction right now.
And look at the Bowman subdivision, how those lots sat there for 15.
11 properties in
Yeah,
one
and then
year and gone.
They just were built here in the last couple of years. They built those homes and sold them, so.
Those sat there for 15 or 20
Yeah.
years.
I don't know
We're
where
beginning to
this.
see too. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know where this fits in, but I also feel that there's a lot of people, that have lived in New London their life and they want to stay here and they're aging.
Mhm.
I mean, we have a great St. Joe's and stuff, but I mean, to me, that's even more advanced. But there are people that don't want the upkeep of that kind of like a senior housing, kind of without the responsibilities of it.
More like the Washington Center. or
Well,
the
even
Trinity
not even
Terrace.
that extreme, I mean, where it is just
Smaller lot, smaller house, they can still be independent.
or
but-
even just I don't even know how to explain it,
Condos or
yeah,
houses or something?
condos that are all together and there's, people that,
Somebody shovels and
yeah,
mows the
right,
lawn.
right.
There's something that's a fairly new trend, at least here. It's not across the country, but we're always 20 years late here in Wisconsin. But called cottage developments. It's basically a single parcel, looks kind of like a condo in terms of the way they're owned, but they're really small cottages laid out in a manner where it kind of creates that community.
Mhm.
That
Probably
might be
that
something.
transition, from owning their home. I mean, they probably still would own the home, but they just don't want the responsibility of the home, but they're not ready for like Washington Center, or, where there's care and,
There'd be an association and they
Yes,
pay into it, so the
yes.
maintenance and those
Right.
things are taken care
Right.
of, just like a condo, but it's really just a different type of structure. It's
Sure.
not an apartment building, it's not condos, row houses that are all attached, they're even more independent than
Right.
that. No, it's good that you mentioned that in senior housing, certainly. I think a lot of what you're talking about refers to what we planners refer to as the missing middle of housing. You've mentioned, a lot of single family with most of your community. You're getting multifamily coming in, but these are, the 8-plex, 16-plex, depending on the size of your community, they're huge. And in a lot of communities, there's nothing in between. And that's where a lot of communities are starting to focus that, not everybody wants to live in an apartment building, but they would like to have something, maybe it is a townhouse or a row house that's a little more independent and not that style. So I think a community like yours with really some, older housing stock, some nice architecture strewed in there, there's other housing styles that might fit very well and be very palatable to the market as well.
And one of the trends we're also seeing too is, we use the word affordable has always been thrown out there in the past, and usually that has some people when they hear that, say, oh, that just means low income people from living in apartments. That's the division that sometimes it's attached to. Now the new term is attainable housing, which kind of talks about what some of those scenarios that Eric was talking about, some of those scenarios there. And what we're beginning to see now in our subdivision designs is smaller lots, going back to smaller lots, more compact lots, maybe even smaller housing for that matter, designed for low maintenance and that type of things at a cost. People seem to be, especially the newer generations that are coming into the market, are a little bit more, they like to spend their money on other things, not just their home. They like to travel, for example. They like to do stuff. And they're willing to make that sacrifice. It's like, I just had a modest-sized house. I'm not going to be there a lot anyway. I was building some equity. I'm in a safe neighborhood, that sort of thing. And I can get in there. If I can get a house for $200,000 to $250,000, I can get in the game and start building some equity. But to get to that price range, especially now, it usually has to be designed with a more compact style. Okay, and I know a lot of the people who have lived in the subdivisions that have been designed in the 90s. You're looking at half-acre lots, and you could certainly get a lot more land and a lot more house for the price back then. But those economics are working against you now, so you're not seeing that. So, I mean, it's really encouraging for me to hear that you folks seem to be open to a wide range of housing types here in the city. Okay, if I'm hearing you right. So that we should bring that into this element a little bit more. But would you also say that maybe, turning a little bit from the larger lot single family residential to more of a compact grid style and some of these newer developed residential areas as you grow would be okay?
I have a granddaughter who just moved from Wapakata, South Carolina. And she and her husband and 2 boys bought a house. I think it's Greenville, South Carolina. And it's in a, I guess you call it a subdivision. They're not, I don't know what their terminology is, but the lots are smaller. And to me, it's cramped living, you know, because I like my big lot. But that's all you see down there is these big developments. Houses look almost all alike, and they can't, they're gone, boom, you know, they're sold before they're even built on these small lots and
Well, that's one way to
roomy
keep the
houses, but
price down
it's
is-
coming. It'll get to Wisconsin, like
Yeah.
you say, we're always a little slower to.
Yeah. I'm no
Get up
fan of
and
the
go.
uniformity, believe me, even with newer developments and those kind of styles, they can get a little bit postage stamp, you know,
Yeah.
so to speak. But there are ways ultimately you can control that, or you can try and build in character, you know, what neighborhoods used to have. So,
The street was, you couldn't park on each side of the
Narrow
street,
streets.
the side, or the roads,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
They all had sidewalks and,
I could switch gears and make a comment about a concern that I have is how can we limit some of our industrial to not become a church? We've had a couple buildings here in the past that have gone, we have an industrial park and we had a electric contractor leave that residence and a church came into that. And I don't feel that that's a good use of that property. So we have some of the businesses in town that I'm not opposed to a church. I think that's a wonderful thing. It's just the fact that I don't think that's the right place for it. So is there a way that we can limit that? I mean, I think we know that an industrial park should be an industrial park and there should be industry there.
yeah, it sounds like it might be a little flaw in your zoning and definitions and some things like that. So there could be a short-term immediate fix. You still need to go through the process publicly, obviously. But we can certainly take a look at that from this context and the descriptions of the districts and if needed, you know, we can flat out put that in there.
Sure.
So if that's the desire here.
As long as you have other areas in your community where those things are allowed.
Yeah.
I mean,
Otherwise, it's called
it's-
exclusionary.
It's not just one thing. I mean, we had the marina, that is now, you know, these buildings are now churches and, you know, I'd like to see them remain businesses. So that's one of the concerns that I have.
On the other hand, you've got churches that are going the other way. They're going to commercial,
Sure.
wedding venues,
Well,
you know, craft
You may
shops.
see that, but I don't see that here.
I've seen over time as well, and maybe something driving churches to look at those kind of facilities is they're trying to be conscious that they don't want to cause any conflicts, because I live directly across the street from a Catholic
Right.
church in Appleton, and yeah, a little Sunday morning, good luck sleeping in. But I have seen the NIMBYism on churches. Never thought I would in Appleton, the southeast part of it. Church is allowed as a use by right under their single family residential. So a church was proposed and everybody in the brand new subdivision was up in arms and basically put enough pressure on to change that. I think it's a church. That's part of a community.
Right.
And here these folks are out there like it's the nastiest polluting industry ever. So I think you're right. Things are changing with church communities from a land use perspective, and we can look at that. I haven't heard too many of those stories. Maybe that leads us into some of the last stuff we want to discuss here quickly is redevelopment, and we see it happen in redevelopment areas too with churches. But one thing we noticed in looking at your descriptions, looking at the map, we're finding more and more communities are putting emphasis on redevelopment areas and highlighting them, using that land use map as a marketing tool, if you will. So when a developer comes in, Chad or the mayor has the right thing in front of him to point, here's the opportunities. And obviously acknowledge on the ground existing areas that may be ripe for redevelopment. So we wanted to know, you know, we're sure you have in your mind some little stretches of a corridor or something next to downtown that should be redeveloped or has an opportunity. Can we work with you folks to get those kind of sketched out in your minds and add an overlay to your existing map so those stand out? Is that something you think would be beneficial for the community?
I think in a marketing sense, I mean, just so we can promote those opportunities on that day.
They'd be considered kind of fuzzy lines, conceptual, so they wouldn't tie you into, things as rigid as zoning, ordinance or something to that effect.
It could work, closely with, our exercise in trying to look for mixed use areas as well. Some of those may actually be redevelopment areas too. But we thought it might be important to at least note some areas that may need to kind of have the rug shook a little bit.
Yeah. Admittedly, when I first looked at your plan, you're required to address redevelopment, and you did. I'm going, that's a little bit vague. That's all there is talking about redevelopment, where many community plans we're working with, they've got pages and pages of the opportunities or the issues, that are out there. So.
Yeah, our assessment there was, we thought most of this stuff was serving you pretty well, but that seemed a little on the weak side for a community of your stature and history.
I don't recall that ever even being a discussion.
It may not have even been discussed, but because it's in the so-called statutes of what this element should address, it was just put in to say, yeah, we got some wording on it. Okay, we can investigate that a little bit more and beef that up. And then the last item we have is more of a homework assignment, Eric.
Yeah, we didn't want to spend all evening here talking about every little statement and thing in the plan, but we do feel it's important. Every chapter in your plan has a set of goals and objectives and a set of policies and recommendations. And again, we don't live here. We don't know what's going on a daily basis. So we need to check in with you on these statements, whether they're accurate, whether they continue to reflect, what the community feels, at least in your mind, or if changes are needed or additions are needed. So we put together just kind of a little worksheet here, 2 of them. I think they're double-sided, and it looks like a lot, but it's not. But we basically put the statements into a worksheet form that asks you to check the box, keep the statement, delete the statement, or modify the statement. Are you both the same? Very good. And then we leave some space so that you can write, any suggested changes in terminology or the strength of the statement, whether you feel you should add something new, just like we talked about. Housing preferences are changing, for example. You can look through these statements. If you don't feel that these are going to adequately capture or support, those types of changes, then we should really look at tweaking some of this language.
For example, we might, based on what we heard tonight, we may want to add a goal here that talks about, trying to be a little bit more diverse in our housing within the city to accommodate as many income, age, workforce people as possible. And that doesn't mean poor quality, it just means more diversity of housing and challenge developers in new areas to think a little bit more than the cookie stamp subdivision. Okay, and trying to address that could be one of them. Okay, and the other would be to maximize. To your point, could be to maximize the true value of commercial and industrial areas to their intended purpose. So we don't get things like that. So this is a little bit more of your chance just to kind of sit there and see if what we have is still on point, it needs to be tweaked a little bit, or put some ideas down for a new goal of generating. Eric's very good with wordsmithing, so don't worry about having to be a Hemingway in terms of how you write it, as long as you get the gist of the direction you think the city needs to go. We'll take care of the rest. Yeah.
You obviously do this all the time. Do you have any municipalities that you've worked with recently that kind of have the same? Because when I first I just moved from Michigan. When I first took this job, I saw that I had 7,400 population here, or 77 or whatever it is. I pulled into town and I was just stunned at the amount of industrial and commercial that's here. So I don't know if there was other municipalities kind of in the area that you've been kind of working with that we could kind of look at maybe a recent comprehensive plan they've done where we could kind of go, oh yeah, I like that. That's kind of cool. But is,
Well,
I'm
you
assuming
gotta
most
give
of
me-
those-
You gotta give me a little bit more on that. When you say other plans and you laid out that scenario, are you saying that you believe that New London has more commercial and industrial than?
it was a
than
lot more than
typical
what I
mix
had
you would see?
anticipated. Just, you see 7,400 people and I guess it wasn't at all what I was expecting when I came in. So I think there's a lot for the amount of people that live here.
Is that a bad thing in your?
No, I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm just saying, are there other communities
Are they
that are
doing
similar to
something
this
better
that we could kind
do
of look at a
better?
comprehensive plan to see if there's a couple things here that I like that they're doing that we're not maybe? Just because we don't know. We don't deal with this every
Like to
day.
compare
So,
ourselves to somebody,
Yeah.
to a brother or sister.
like if
city
there
to
was
say,
a,
wow, they
I
have.
don't know,
Well, you have
Clintonia
this
or
housing that really
Hortonville.
looks attractive and the New London may
Right.
want to mirror that
We've
in the
got some
future.
samples already that we're working with.
Is that
some
kind of
other
what you're going off
communities
of?
that might be able
Well, I
to-
just thought something
Let
might
me
trigger
address-
something that you're like, oh yeah, that's a great
Every
idea.
community is a little bit different. A lot of it ties back to its history. I'll just go to Green Bay, where I live.
Yep.
Okay, and there's a bunch of burbs around the city of Green Bay that have developed with that. Now, Ashwaubenon, that's where the Green Bay Packer Stadium is. Okay, well, there is a lot of in commercial industrial in Ashwaubenon compared to how much residential. Very similar to like you. They don't complain about it because it's a big tax generating type of use. So their residents that live there,
Yeah.
good thing,
yeah.
good deal. Okay, you now go across the area, you go to Elway. It's just the opposite. It's primarily a residential area. Okay, it's got a few little neighborhood corner commercial areas. Don't really have any industrial. That wasn't really set up that way. Okay, so their challenges are a little bit different because their tax base isn't as aggressive as the Ashwaubenons of the world. In your situation here, you got to pay bills. I'm sure people in your community want their taxes to be as low as possible. My feeling is if you can handle commercial, get commercial, it looks good, it doesn't cause any heartburn in the community, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I wasn't
Saves a lot
saying
of
that,
bills.
and then I wasn't trying to
Yeah,
intimate that was a negative thought. I was
Yeah.
just, it wasn't what I was expecting.
okay.
And I just wonder if there's, because I hear like Hortonville, Clintonia, or different ones. I don't know if some of them were similar, where we kind of maybe look at their plan just to get some ideas. I mean, I deal with zoning all day, but
There
to
are,
say that I reconcile it with a master plan all the time, I'm probably as guilty as others. It probably doesn't get out of the, off the shelf as much as it should.
I think as an outsider, you make a very astute observation. Obviously, things are different in Michigan than they are here for a variety of reasons. But I think the main reason for the existence of what we have here in New London, just like many other communities nearby, with Wapaka, Shawanoes, Black Creek even, is just the proximity to the metro areas, to the Fox Cities, to Green Bay, Fond du Lac, Oshkosh. That whole corridor obviously is the economic generator. If that didn't exist or wasn't doing good, you wouldn't be doing good here either. So you combine that, the population, with the transportation system, which maybe it's in need of repair constantly, but it is pretty good. And so you're here at the intersection of two major state highways. So accessibility from a business perspective and moving their product is certainly a key thing. And many of the communities of this relative size are very similar in that sense.
Yep.
Until you start getting more up north, that starts to back off.
I've been staying in Oshkosh and we drove up to, what's that sporting goods store next to the Lambeau?
Yeah.
So I drove up there and I was, wow, there is not a break in businesses. And it was pretty impressive, really, driving through there, but,
Yeah, that's really the lifeblood of the whole northeastern Wisconsin is that corridor. So the connections of business to business relationships between their workforce, being a bedroom community, all of those things come into play.
Right.
Where you're right, I never thought about it.
Well,
Our
what
communities
new-
are very different in that respect.
and with New London, you got that corridor there. At some point that's full. They start doing this. So, it's going to benefit this area quite a bit too. So.
All very good points, and those are the things we want to try and capture. And we got a lot out of this initial conversation. We'll certainly have more and some things for you to react to. these last two pages, I just wanted to double check, make sure each of you have one that says 8.8 and 8.9. I wanted to make sure I didn't screw up and give you two of the same as I was handing them out. Okay. We'd like to have you stare at these, before the weather gets really nice. So the sooner you do this, the happier you're going to be. But maybe give ourselves about 2 weeks. If you can look at this over about 2 weeks, we'd ask you don't have to put your name on it, so it can be anonymous in that sense. But we'd like you to hand these back over to Chad to collect, and we'll get them from him, or I'm sure you can scan them in and send them over. But 2 weeks, we'll send a check in, or we'll have Chad remind you of that, and we'll see what we come up with. It's not the end of the world. We can still make changes to those things as we discuss and work toward the end goal of this project. But
Yeah, and anything is fair game here that we passed out tonight, if you want to make a comment and send it in. We're not just limiting you to 8.8, 8.9, and was it 8.6 with the issues? Anything is fair game here to begin with. We take all comments, right?
Yep.
So it's a good thing. But tonight was more of an icebreaker. You've given us some general idea. We got a good feel for how you use your plan. We heard a little bit about your housing and the aggressive nature of commercial. We're start taking a peek at some redevelopment areas in terms of things we might want to note. We'll take a look at some mixed use areas as well, see if we've got some candidates for that where we can provide some flexibility. And we'll maybe suggest some editing to some of these management areas, the conservancy designation and so forth, so we're not sending a mixed signal to some of your ag areas. And things may pop up, and we'll email Chad if there's something that a burning question that we want to get answered before our next meeting. We'll make sure Chad gets it out to you. Do you have anything else?
I've got nothing else, so Chad.
So just to be clear, that 2 weeks would be April 16th-ish, somewhere in there. Our next regular meeting is typically the fourth Thursday, so the 22nd. I don't know if you guys were planning on coming back with us at our next plan meeting, or do we need to adjust that based on your schedule? If we get them, if we get this stuff and I get it back to you like the 15th, 16th, our next plan meeting would be the 22nd, or would we need to push it back a week?
Well, yeah, what's the one after the 22nd?
I think we're probably going to need a little more time on our end to digest things, get that land use updated and really kind of dig in.
Yeah, because we're going to need that from you too.
Yep. So are you guys available to push it back a week to the 29th instead of the 22nd for our next meeting? Sure. Okay, so we'll look at doing that.
What would be your regular schedule, maybe?
It's usually usually the fourth Thursday, so it would be the 27th.
What's that? What time or?
I think it might be beneficial. I want to just make sure we're not falling short on good information to share. And if we've got to rely on getting some feedback and some of the mapping updated, it might get crunched pretty quick there. So maybe we skip April and we'll do the May one, if that works fine.
Sure.
Works better.
How the weeks go by very quickly, it seems.
Yep. Okay, so then we'll plan on
Usually first of
bringing
May.
you guys back at the May 27th meeting.
That should be fine.
And we'll keep our regular meeting for April. The next meeting would be the 22nd technically.
And we can talk about it after the meeting, but I've got those maps there that.
So just for homework, so I document this right. We're going to be working on the 8.8 and 8.9 documents there. We're going to be reviewing 8.6 to see if there's any, conflicts in there. And are we doing anything with the map yet? I didn't catch on that yet.
Well, no.
Okay.
No, we're not. We're
Not
gonna
for
come
plan
up.
commission level, no.
Not at the plan commission level, no. Eric and I will play with some ideas. So we'll bring Brad in there. Okay. And, but you and staff will need to do is look at the existing land use map. And we have those quadrants here.
Good.
So that'll give you more time to do that too.
Good.
So you gotta work out.
And then one question that I had, just, when you're doing the preferred land use, and like I said, I just never gone through this process before. When you're looking at the land use outside the current city limits and going into the township, is there a process or relationship with the townships that you work through Do we ask them for input?
There's an element in the plan called intergovernmental relations, okay? And really, it's kind of however you want to handle the show. I've worked with incorporated communities like cities and villages that have brought the towns in the planning stage and asked them for their input. That's not a bad idea, okay? But, they do get nervous when you show big expansion plans into the town because they lose land and they lose tax base. So it's not uncommon that cities, villages, incorporated municipalities will do a plan. It's requirement of the statute that you have to send the plan to your neighboring communities, okay, for comment. So they will get a chance automatically to comment. It's a matter of, do you want to bring them in before that happens and have that discussion? Or do you want to go through what's in the best interest of the city, develop the plan, and then just send it out to them for comment and see where the cards fall at that point? All right.
The villages and cities do have the right to plan outside of their boundaries, but obviously they have very limited control to make that change unless it's annexed. And again, we know and understand that most of those annexations are requested by property owners. It's not the cities being big bad guys going out and snatching up property. But some folks still think that's true. So I always suggest, trying to be proactive on those kind of discussions, and we'll kind of wait till see what we end up with. But you may want to have a special meeting before the formal approval and amending your plan to just have, reach out and invite them in and talk about it. So we found can be very successful and ease any tensions or fears because you took time to explain it to them instead of them just wondering, what does this all mean? It's a takeover,
I guess the most recent one that I did was in the city of Pomeroy, in the town of Pomeroy. And it actually was a pretty successful meeting. They even talked about roads, roads and upgrading roads and maintaining roads. So there was some benefit. Yeah, there are some awkward moments, no question about it, but you're going to be dealing with them. So as Eric said, you either do it proactively or just follow the statutes and do it, with the authority you're given. Sometimes that can lead to an adversarial situation. I think Eric's right. What we do is have the next meeting, we have a plan to kind of look at it, make some adjustments to it, and then say, okay, we're pretty comfortable with this. Let's invite the town to take a look at it before you do any formal amendment, and go from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody got anything else for him? Okay, thank you.
Good, thank
You're
you.
welcome. Look forward to working at the city.
Yeah.
Good discussion tonight.
Appreciate it very much. Enjoy the rest of the evening and the warm weekend.
Eric, I did get 2 8.8s.
Who did you?
I can give them mine.
I got one here.
Cool. Thank you.
Best prize I've seen. Podium.
Okay, Chad, you want to give us an update on planning issues and the agenda items?
Nope. I think obviously we'll be continuing discussions on here. Like number 10 says, 10A, I mean, we're still working through that process and still waiting on information. I know Dave and Randy have been working with that property owner on that situation and still waiting, still nothing to bring forward as of yet, so.
Anything on the other property over there on the river?
Which property? The
Where she wanted,
Cindy.
Cindy.
Oh, that's what this one is, wasn't it?
Well,
Yeah, that's one.
that, is that 50? Oh, okay.
That's the one I was referring to
Oh,
under
okay.
10A.
All right.
Was that?
Okay, the next meeting date was going to be, you said the 22nd, 23rd, 22nd.
22nd would be our next regular meeting.
Anybody got anything else? I guess we entertain an adjournment.
Also move.
I'll second it.
Motion made and second to adjourn. All in favor? Adjourn.